Education Committee. It's Monday, February 28th, shortly past 3. And I am Chair Henderson. I have Vice Chair Councilman Mendez with me and Councilman Rosenberg. We are awaiting some other colleagues who we hope will be joining us soon, and if you are not able to join us today. Okay, colleagues, so before you and anyone, I guess, Councilman Parker, you're welcome to look at those materials as well. We've got before us, kind of just for review and discussion, a timeline for our process, as well as a summary of proposals that have been submitted to us by colleagues. And as we discussed at previous meetings, because there was some interest around kind of right-sizing boards and commissions, I asked staff to compile for us boards and commissions that are established by charter. As we all know, Metro has many commissions, some established by ordinance, some by state law, and some by charter. So as we work through some of the things we have on our list today, that's why we kind of have this bullet pointed list about boards and commissions. So those are the three materials before you. We last met November 16th, just to kind of kick off this discussion, discuss a rough timeline at that time, and to discuss how we thought it might be best to engage our colleagues and invite, hello, Councilwoman Johnson. No, we're just getting started. I was just reviewing what those materials are right there that you are welcome to, and it's pretty self-evident, mostly just for the public's edification there that I'm running through them. Thank you for joining us. So we met first in November, discussed how we would invite colleagues to submit proposed charter amendments as well. Between November 16th, January 27th, around that November time. We also had an executive committee of the council, and at that time I invited committee chairs to be in touch with related department heads to see if they as well had any charter revisions or things that they were thinking about. So we did invite our committee chairs to also engage those departments. But as you all know, we had an email that went out to council inviting them to make their submittals. That was done at the early part of this month. And so the second document that you have before you summarizes those. And so that brings us to today in this special meeting. And so I wanted to put it over to staff, to Ms. Darby and or Ms. Zeitlin, just to kind of walk us through the remainder of the timeline and what was the reasoning around that. We are trying to get colleagues in front of the budget, but we also want to have sufficient time to have some deferrals and discussion, and as well for this committee, if we need to, to kind of work on fine-tuning any of these particular proposals once we arrive at, what they're going to be. So we want to have in some work time. Yes?
Somebody who is looking to watch this, because it's on the schedule for MNN to be broadcast live, and it's not being broadcast.
Okay.
They just tweeted out a broadcast schedule, and it didn't include the committees.
Yeah, I had asked that it for certain be recorded. See, we've got our light on. Let's see if we've got a green light on the camera.
Well, let's see.
Is green light being recording?
No, we can't tell from here whether it's being recorded.
It means the microphone's on, so I would think that would mean that it's recording as well, but let me see what I can find out.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So for those listening or watching, we're just taking a brief pause. I think we might not be being recorded.
live on the committee room 2 channel.
Okay.
Okay.
So like the live stream?
It's on the committee room stream, yeah. Yeah, we'll confirm that it's being recorded, but it should be, yeah.
Okay.
Just may not be on M&N. Okay,
So
they're
folks can
confirming.
find the live stream from the Nashville.
Say that one more time?
Folks can find the live stream from nashville.gov, and then subsequent to this meeting, though, they can find it where?
It's on YouTube,
On
the
YouTube.
Metro Nashville YouTube page.
Okay. As Charter Revision Committee. Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Mendez, for bringing that to our attention. Okay, if we were back at today's date and looking ahead for the rest of the timeline. So, Ms. Darby, can you?
So today and March 14, we have a special meeting scheduled in order to review the proposals and make some determinations about what should go into a resolution. March 29th would be the filing deadline for the resolution for the April 5th meeting. The idea about the April 5th meeting is that we would then have a couple of deferrals built in, so that final passage would be on May 5th. But between that time, we have some additional time for some work sessions for this committee to review. After March 29th, when the resolution is filed, it will be picked up by the Charter Revision Commission. I believe it's a 7-member commission. Anyway, they will review all of the amendments at that time and make recommendations back to the council. I'm told that they plan to have one meeting, and they will take as long as they need to review any amendments that are presented to them at that time. So as you can see, April 18 and April 25th are some special meetings / work sessions if the committee would like to have those on an as-needed basis. May 5th is the first date that we can pass the resolution in order to get it on the April ballot, and May 17th is the last day we can pass the resolution in order to get it on the ballot.
And so just to be clear, just so colleagues understand, really, I mean, May 5th is the first day,
Yeah.
based on how the charter is written. So if anybody's wondering, why is it so kind of compressed around that date? And then, as we discussed at our last meeting, targeting and planning around, obviously, per this timeline, for the August 2nd ballot. Colleagues, does anybody have questions for Ms. Darby or comments about the timeline as proposed?
I do.
Okay.
Why does it say that we have to do this between May 5th and May 17th? I remember last time we considered it, we had a couple months of options for passage.
Ms. Darby, can you answer that?
I wasn't here the
So
last time.
here's the, so the way that the state law on election timing reads is that basically if the council passes the resolution, they have a 75 to 90-day window to put it on the election. The election commission has discretion to place it onto the election if it's passed earlier, but if you're wanting to direct the election commission.
The election commission have discretion anymore. Thank you. That's the difference. I'll say it. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, any other questions, suggestions particular to the timeline? Okay. Ms. Darby, one question that occurs to me, you indicated that the Charter Revision Committee would set their meeting subsequent to our filing. Can you speak to, from the council's perspective, what this committee's engagement is at the commission level, if at all? Does anybody need to be there to speak on behalf of, the reasoning for the particular amendments, or sort of, defend them there? What is the format of that meeting typically?
I don't know what the format will be, but I do know that the commission has the ability to have a public hearing, and so they probably will want to hear from council members about the specifics on the the amendments that are proposed by the council.
They've done that in the past.
Last term, generally the sponsor of various amendments would speak and they would ask questions to understand it. It's a very thoughtful group.
Okay, I appreciate that. So the primary sponsor of the amendment that is approved by this committee would want to be present to
I
speak
think that
to
would be
it.
advisable.
Okay. And I guess, colleagues, as I look at this, I sort of think about, fine-tuning any of the language of the amendments that are, originating in council, but also to kind of, double-checking those that are coming from the administration side. I don't know if, I guess it kind of remains to be seen based on the choices that we make at the meeting on the 14th. But I guess I would suggest perhaps that, if we might need to have a work session potentially before, I'm just kind of order of operations, right? I don't think once the commission makes their recommendations, the extent to which we're further amending or adjusting subsequent to that, I think we may want to think about that. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the
Vice
best
Chair?
we can hope for is that they would do like the planning commission, where they would say, generally like this, but we'd really like to see some section changed a little bit. I think most times they just say yay or nay for recommending. I do think last term there was an example of them saying, we'd like it if
Okay. Yep.
something happened.
Okay, so advisory in that regard. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments about this timeline? Nope. Okay. All right. Then let's then move to the charter revision submissions. So as organized, the first section here is council member proposals received after January of this year. So that's when we put out the call to colleagues and requested their submissions. This also includes some resubmissions, so things that were kind of within the council office previously by a council member. Kind of they re-upped it, right, which I guess says they have a certain continued confidence in it. And then council member proposals received prior to this term in Section B. These were not resubmitted for consideration. I think our communication was pretty clear that we were wanting folks to do that, but I want us just to be mindful of, but these, again, are from this term. So it's not as though they're kind of, legacy ones from many, many years ago. So I thought it might be relevant for us to still include them. And then lastly, we have proposals from the administration. And so, to the extent that some of these, dovetail or don't, and as we kind of consider, what is the community's bandwidth on the ballot. And so I think, it's not that it's a magic number, but I think we have heard from, election commission staff that, 6 is about their suggested capacity. That said, maybe we have 5 solid ones here the committee feels strongly about, maybe there's 7. Again, I don't think 6 is a magic number, but I think we do want to think of them in kind of in the collective, because to the extent that some of the ones from the administration are pretty lengthy, it's just the way in which they have to be presented. I don't know if y'all were nerdy enough to dig into our OneDrive folder with all the kind of historic stuff of what has been proposed and what has been successful and what the language was. And I guess we'll all just remember as voters recently, there's a lot of language there that is required. And so, would that we could kind of condense it, right, for the public. And if you wanted to look for more, you could kind of go, but it's all got to be sort of in line. And so there really is probably a threshold of being able to kind of absorb that. So, I guess we will just kind of work through these. They are grouped somewhat thematically, I guess you would say, or topically. They're not in any priority order, just want to be clear about that. And we've had several colleagues to suggest or look at amending the charter as far as, amending the charter, a section called Article 19. And I don't know if there are kind of colleagues among us that want to update. I know that there is some legislation on the Hill that is related that would kind of get Nashville in line with state law. And
Yep.
so I would just look to any colleague who might have an awareness about this, want to share a little bit more.
So,
Councilman Mendez.
when it says draft received in that first item, it's a draft received from me, which would be a total rewrite of Article 19 of the charter. And the change would be inconsistent with what the Nashville Chamber has proposed at the state level. And I've got a meeting coming up with the Nashville Chamber. Frankly, I'm asking them to back off of their inconsistent legislation. I don't think we should be in the business of limiting Metro power through state law. We get enough of that that they think of. We don't need the chamber asking to have Metro power limited at the state level also. So my view is that respectfully to all other charter amendment ideas, trying to end the $1 million a year litigation that we're going through is the single biggest thing that we're facing with the charter. And there's no question we're spending $1 million a year on litigation, at least in recent years. And a lot of it is on imprecise language that, for whatever reason, has become subject to litigation that we could change, clarify, and just a few examples is there's been near constant litigation over what the term preceding general election means, because it dictates how many signatures to get, and the signature target floats on turnout from election to election. And so there's been rampant litigation over that. So getting a set threshold for signatures that applies to all elections should help. Let me just run through the other things real quick. There's been, the litigation currently happens after all the signatures have been gathered, which is not the norm in the rest of the state. And we could make changes to make it so litigation, if any, happens prior to signatures being gathered, so we don't have to have thousands of Nashvillians sign something and then feel like the rugs get
Yeah.
jerked out from underneath them.
Yep.
There's multiple disputes over timelines, and there's been a lot of disputes lately over what types of legal challenges can keep something off a ballot. And these are all things that we're capable of writing something clear that would make the process better. And because it's $1 million a year issue, because it's been, frankly, threatens the existence of Metro in some regards with the way the direction some of the referendum items have been taken, I view this as the single biggest thing we face. And on the broader picture of what to include, I would say, frankly, I would tell the administration to pick one or two that they'd like to see, and have the council pick one or two things that it wants to cover in addition to this, but have the lion's share of the focus being on we gotta do what we can to cut off some of this litigation.
Ready for you? So the second one where it says the 10% threshold of registered voters,
Yeah, that's
is that part of, or is that different than yours?
that's
Yes.
somebody else.
Each one of these
Oh.
represent a separate.
Okay.
And
That was mine.
and I'll this isn't the meeting to get deep into the weeds. So I'm happy to answer questions in response to what I'm about to say, but I just want to get it out there.
Yeah.
I've been working on my language since the fall with many of the people who have been litigating these issues for the last couple of years, and with the people in Metro Legal that litigate these issues. And the idea is just to do a full rewrite of Section 19 to, rather than pick out the threshold number, because that's the easy thing to do, but that's not the only thing that's driving litigation. The litigation is being driven by a bunch of other sort of lawyer dork disputes. So anyway, that second one, I haven't seen it, but I interpret it as only narrowly addressing the number threshold without addressing some of the other fixes
Yeah.
for Article 19.
I think this is something that probably needs to go on, and to what, how, to the extent, I'm just wondering if it would be, I know it would be helpful to me to see an analysis of what is currently there, what the state / chamber, whatever's going on there, and then yours, just to sort of bulletproof it out for,
Yeah.
that would be helpful to see, cause obviously it's a problem, and we need to clarify if that's what's causing litigation is what's the,
Yeah. Most notably, the chamber one is also just a narrow fix aimed at the threshold number. It's a little, there's an argument that what the chamber's got up at the state would eliminate the ability to recall a district council person. Like, maybe some people think that's a good idea, but I personally don't think we should kill off the mechanism in the charter to recall a district council member. And the current legislation, the way it's termed right now at the state, would eliminate the ability to recall a district council member. But you're right, people are gonna wanna know, side by side, current, by different attributes, current deal, what I've got proposed, what the chamber is trying to get done with the state.
that would be really helpful.
I think that would be very helpful. Yes.
So the bill at the state, the chamber, again, they make a habit out of going around us up there. We should remember that at budget time. But their bill has gone through committee with no opposition and is on the House floor today and goes to Senate committee tomorrow.
And
That just deletes the exception that Davidson County has in the state statute that allows us to set the threshold instead of the state dictating it.
What is their threshold?
It's 15%
Of
15.
registered.
of registered voters.
Oh, okay.
In no
And
particular election, just of registered.
It,
at the-
registered voters, period, yeah, I get it.
And to be clear, if the chamber bill at the state passes and becomes law before we get to May, then we might have to crumple this up and toss it up.
Right,
So,
okay. Okay.
So, I think to Vice Chair Mendez's point, this obviously, as I said, this is not in any really particular order, but I think that is kind of an existential issue. And then I think as well in the framing of it, it's a confidence in government thing, because the fact that we're always litigating this and what is the general election. So I think, in a kind of good governance, clarity, faith in government, it's an important one to advance. Can the administration speak to what's happening on the Hill and the implications of that? So I think, as best I had understood, it's, while we may concur with the particular threshold amount being aligned with state law, some of the other aspects of it are taking away kind of local control.
Sure.
Mr. Jameson.
On the bottom of page 2, the administration proposals, number 2, we're in alignment with Councilman Mendez's item number 1, amending Article 19. I think the Chamber's reaction was, with our encouragement when we were encountering the litigation repeatedly, they were trying to be helpful. I had not asked Ginger Hauser to be here. I know she has circled back with the chamber to discuss how that might be adjusted, and I don't have her answer as of today, but I know she's having that discussion. I know Councilman Mendez is meeting with them
a week from today.
next week. So hopefully get in alignment with them before too late.
Okay, Councilman Rosenberg, though, you said the timeline was it's on the House floor today, and then so in the Senate
Goes to Senate committee tomorrow. It's sponsored by Senators Yarborough and Hale. And so I assume they're just waiting to see what the House does before it moves there, so it could pass by next week.
Is it possible for you to, because I know you're obviously working on a more holistic part of Article 19, and I don't want to throw all that work out, because it probably does need to be overhauled, for lack of a better term. Is it possible to take, if this happens at the state, that is obviously sort of out of our control, we take that part out or reword that specific part about those thresholds and keep the rest of, or is it not even worth it at that point?
Well, and listen, on the 6.5 years in office, I haven't been like Councilman Rosenberg on the chamber. I've typically voted in favor of chamber-related things and been a supporter. But they are clear in conversations with. I don't think I'm speaking out of school with legal director Wally Dietz in conversation with me. They want their solution. They're not having a negotiation. They're not having a discussion. They want their solution, and they're going for it. I haven't asked the people I've been working with to put the energy into figuring out, well, what do we do if that thing passes? I think that if it passes, our discretion kind of ends. Like, then we're going to run referendum the way the state law says we run it. We'll have to take a hard look if they pass it about whether there's still something we need to clean up. But we're going to do it the way the state law works if they pass it, is what I think.
All right.
Okay, well, I would just mention to committee that we do have a quorum here now. So, I mean, if there is anything that we would like to call for as a committee from the administration, that if colleagues feel that's constructive when we get to the end of our discussion, we can do that, because, I would hope that the chamber would want to work with us in a compatible way. I appreciate Mr. Jameson. I think what I hear you saying, and then again, just for the public's, because you all can't quite be seen on camera, but it's Mr. Jameson from the mayor's office, is that in a kind of litigious and volatile time, the thought was that was helpful on their part, and that was kind of initiated in that regard. But at this juncture, it sounds that they are less willing to kind of understand that they may be in a space that's not as helpful as we need. So I think I would be looking to hear back very specifically on what's happening
Understood.
with that from Ms. Hauser.
Understood. And let me get with Ms. Hauser. Again, they were, I think at the time, the chamber would say they were trying to be helpful. And it's only a more recent development that perhaps it's not as helpful as we would need it to be. But let me, before I talk out of turn, find out exactly where the chamber is.
What I hear also, if this is a correct characterization, it's not just that it's not as helpful as it could be, but it's also potentially detrimental, is what I'm hearing. So.
Understood.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not aware, but I will
Okay.
find that out.
All right. Okay, in this section, these are kind of items particular to the size of council, the mayor relative to the council, and so while these items, they've kind of been edited, I think, by Ms. Zeitlin and Ms. Darby, kind of for brevity and clarity. You can see some of them do sort of reflect the voice, so to speak, of the person proposing them. I don't know what this item is really asking for respectfully, so increase equality between council and mayor and increase equity. Just reading, change and or update draconian laws, lack of equity. Also, there should be something to ensure that the mayor and Metro Council work alongside one another, and it is not a mayor-led type of government. Okay, duly noted. But I guess from our process, or what we asked of colleagues was, 5 sentences to justify what section of the charter would you change, how would you change it, and what would it do? And so best I understand, Ms. Darby, did this come with any companion specific passages from the charter?
It did not.
Okay. All right, remove the mayor's line item veto, remove the mayor's line item appropriation veto as described in Article 5, Section 5.04. Any additional research to that? Obviously, they provided the specific charter section, so that's in line with our process as we outlined it.
We've never had a line item veto.
Yeah. Do any colleagues have any particular comments or questions for staff to get back to us on that one?
How many times has that happened?
Yeah, how many times, good question, how many times has that been used?
I mean,
Look into it, but I can't recall a time when it's happened. I know it's been
I don't-
discussed, but I
yeah.
don't know if it's ever happened.
I don't know that I necessarily, if it's not happening all that often and we're trying to narrow 3 pages of stuff down to 6, I'm thinking, I mean, I just don't
That
know.
sounds like something to fix, but maybe on the second resolution.
Yeah.
Right. I agree with that. Yeah, and I think that's important to share for colleagues and for the community. We get 2 bites at this apple, so to speak, per term. This would be the first, and so, I think it's good to garner all the the thoughts of the council from minutia to, bigger picture existential things like we're talking. So, but I think as we outlined in our email to council, that's no kind of promise of a laundry list charter amendment to include all these things. So we respect and appreciate everybody's contribution to this, and if, we as a committee at next meeting don't vote to include it, that doesn't, that just means not at this time. So here is a perennial one I think many members of council agree with, and probably some disagree, but decreasing the size of the council, set the council at 21 districts, no at-large, although the proposer was open to a discussion of kind of the right number, and then also changed term limits to 3 terms. I guess as we all know and the community knows, this has been taken up before.
Yeah, I mean, the public hates this.
Yeah.
Every
Well-
chance they get, they vote against it.
I don't know, it was pretty close last time it was proposed, and there was no campaign, educational
Yeah.
campaign or anything
Yeah, I don't
in
know that it
advance
was,
of it.
I don't think it was presented in maybe the best way.
Y'all are welcome to it.
It was, I think it was a
Yeah,
single
bad.
digit.
I think, in just chatting with colleagues over the years, I think, and you can very much see, right, colleagues, as you go into a 1963 charter, that it was very much written in 1963. One of the things we did amending last time was, Councilman Rosenberg and myself, every pronoun in that thing was he, the mayor, he, the policeman, the what, so, it was a document for its time. And at that time, metro government was much smaller and the city was smaller, and so, a 40-member part-time body was a compromise between a county council and a city council. And so, the efficacy of that, to Councilman Mendez's point, but also I concur with Councilman Rosenberg, I don't think it was particularly well presented or organized. All due respect, I appreciate the effort. But I think it's something that we as a committee might want to think about for the future, just from an educational perspective. I would ask maybe colleagues to be thinking about if this is something about which you feel strongly one way or the other, and whether through peer cities or analysis or good points from an educational standpoint, if it's something that once we get past this more concerted existential near-term effort, if somebody wants to look at that a little bit more, I think that would be time well spent after this process. That's my take on it.
Chair,
Yes.
I'm certainly okay. It keeps making it on the list, so we can keep talking about it. I would be remiss if I didn't say that, one, the 40-person compromise was directly a race-related compromise. 2, I say this to people all the time, it could be that Nashville has been as successful as it's been over the last 50 years because our district council people are closer to their constituents. And it might not be a bug, it might be a feature. I mean, I'm happy to keep debating. I personally think the race-related compromise that made it be 40 is still relevant today, and we could expect less percent minority representation if we went to a different size body. But happy to. I don't think it should be in this round that we're trying to get on the August ballot, but happy to keep talking about it.
Can I briefly talk about it? Because allow me to retort. First of all, I don't know that Nashville's success is attributable to the Metro Council, and I would.
I resemble that remark.
You know, I think the way that we've hamstrung council members without having staff to help with constituent things is a more effective way of getting at it than having 40 members that are very hard to wrangle. You have to find people who are smart enough to serve and dumb enough to run in 35 distinct areas of town, which is extremely difficult. And I don't understand the math behind why that would create less minority representation, but I want to hear about that. But I think it's very difficult. I think 40 members from very, the way it's structured creates a weaker council and one that's less likely to have engagement with executive departments because they can't spend adequate time with 40 members.
Can I ask about the difference between the two positions that you all are articulating? And I know, Councilmember Henderson, Madam Chair, you've been very invested in this. I feel like those of us who have served since 2015, we know that Nashville's explosive growth has been carried on the shoulders of, particularly at the district level, in ways that I don't think it was, right? And we made one key staff decision that I think changed everybody's lives for the better, which was to have a planning liaison full-time in the council office, right? I do wonder sometimes if we fought to staff the council office appropriately at 40, does it resolve some of the tension between the positions? Because, I mean, right now, I could be wrong, and I guess I'll ask our office director, do we have anybody whose role is principally constituent services at this point?
That role is being handled by 2 people in our office at this point, amongst their other responsibilities.
Right. So we don't have a single dedicated person to follow up on I mean, I get hundreds of emails every single day, right? Like hundreds. And it'd be great to have even partial support to offloading just for the follow through. Even if I can be an initial point of contact on a personal individual level, there are things that take weeks to resolve, and it'd be great to just have the efficiency there. If I knew I could count on that, then all of a sudden I get better at this job, people are more satisfied, right? Like those things are all true.
I want to speak to the job description of constituent services, because there was a situation in the beginning of our term, and it was a first termer, that an emergency came up. I had an emergency come up, and I just called a council member and said, can you handle this, when I'm out with my dad? And that worked. I just didn't really know any better. But someone else went to constituent services and was told, like, hey, I'm going to be gone for like 2 days. Can you just handle the stuff, the minutia type stuff that comes in? And she was told, no, that's not my job.
Right, but I think that speaks to the performance of the office, and I do think there's a line, right? It's sort of like before the recovery from the Great Recession, right, in 2007, 2008, if you draw that out at 2011, 2012, 2013, growth just went like this, right? And I think there was maybe a time when, again, whether it's anachronistic or not, like that size might not have been a limiting factor to performance. I'm not sure if you could just say in absolute terms over time and changing performance. It's why we talk about this stuff, that there may be some in between, I don't know. But I think the discussion is worthwhile.
I think there's, different ways to get to where we're trying to be, which is a more efficient and effective body for our constituents. I think it's really hard for someone that works full-time, to have the amount that comes through. There's some districts that are more active than others. Mine is actually decently stable, especially from a zoning perspective, and I still get so many emails. If I had an 8 to 5 job, there is absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way that I would be able to handle what I currently handle. And that's not fair, because not everybody is in a situation where I've got a really flexible job and, you know, that type of stuff. So I think, you know, do we reduce the size and increase the amount of money so that that does become your full-time position? Do we invest more in the council office so that the customer service aspect of what we do is kind of covered? And I think there's an argument for that too, because there's some consistency there. Because every 4 years you shouldn't have to be worried about, oh gosh, what's the email address? What's, you know, now it's Freddie, oh now it's Dave, you know. And there's someone there that's in this office hopefully longer than 4 years or whatever. You know, I mean, again, there's multiple ways to do it. I do think we're derelict in our duty to not talk about how to make this better for people, because all we're doing is continuing to grow. So those 20,000 constituents per is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger, and so the problem gets bigger and bigger. And I think we can do better as a body taking care of the people that we represent.
I would suggest that there is enough concern or interest in the body and in the community. I mean, I think, you know, to Bob's point, I think, you know, there's some people who are just, oh, you know, it's ridiculous that it's so big. But when you talk to them about the history of why it is that way, then people are like, oh, well, I can see that. And I think, you know, we do have a very diverse body, happily, that reflects the city. We are now 50% women as of this term. And so there are some good things about the large council. And, you know, we need to kind of get all that out there. And I think, you know, if we did have appropriate staff support, you could create a web page that shared the history and the look and the da-da-da-da, and you could research and you could, you know. So I just, I think, you know, for purposes of this pass at the charter amendment, I think it is too heavy a lift. There's too much literal history there and concern. And I think some more work that we need to do on our side. We've had a whole lot of volatility, multiple mayors, multiple vice mayors, multiple office directors, and so forth. But I do think, as a committee, making a concerted effort to develop just kind of like education materials, honestly, to facilitate a constructive discussion that in time could lead to a charter amendment. You know, webinars, forums, things in the community. You know, this has previously been kind of a campaign separate and apart from the council body, and so you know, it requires some marketing, whatever approach is taken. But does anybody have a kind of proposal for what that might look like, or want to bring that back to next committee meeting about maybe what that could look like? Kind of, we're a little committee, but you know, a working group of some sort might be appropriate for this.
I mean,
any thoughts on that?
probably a working group is best, but I don't even know that we need to do it right now. If it's not going to
Oh,
go
yeah.
on this resolution, I feel like.
Right. I am not.
But I think those like
suggesting-
special called meetings where we changed the committee structure, I think was helpful. That was multiple meetings. We all got together. The people that were interested in it got, you know, I think it's a deep dive situation where we can figure out what our goals are and then how can we come to a consensus on the best way to get to those goals. So I would say we can move on probably today and just say that we're gonna handle it
Okay.
after.
Yeah, and all this, you know, the super at large rolls into that same conversation.
Yeah,
so
for
that
sure.
can all
So
be,
those
Yeah.
are all kind of together. Anything regarding the super at-large districts, does anybody feel very strongly that that's something that needs to happen at this time, or as suggested, it could just be rolled into
I think that goes with council size.
Yep, roll it in.
Agreed. Okay, all right. Moving on to our kind of boards.
I can't help but, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I hate that idea. Just the super at large is
Oh, the
like,
super at large,
yeah,
oh.
it's-
Feel free to comment at this time, go ahead.
Get elected by 7 districts, but still quote,
Yeah,
it
let
says
me just
represent
read,
the whole
Bob,
county.
for the record,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so I read decrease council size, but I should also read 2 proposals for super at-large districts. Have the 5 at-large council members be elected from 5 different areas of the county, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and downtown, while each at-large could still cover the county at-large. This would ensure equal representation across the county. There could be an equal number of council districts, 7, because we have 35 districts at present, in each of the 5 at-large areas to ensure population balance. There was a separate proposal, convert the at-large seats to super districts, each representing 7 continuous, I think that maybe should be contiguous, existing council districts and elected from that super district instead of county-wide.
And just briefly, one of the games I like to play when I'm running around the 500 square miles that I represent is like, what's the 2 farthest places in the county? And I think 2 of the at-larges actually live at what is just about the farthest away you can live from each other in this county. With Councilman Glover on the county line by Mount Juliet and 2 at-larges in Bellevue. It's like literally the farthest you could drive in this county from each other. And I think and also district council members in particular areas are very good at aligning their interests together. The Antioch folks align, the 2 of you and council members around you, when there's something in the area, are very good at aligning and always get the at-larges to come join the party when there's a group of regional district council members that are aligned on something. And so that's one I'm curious. I mean, it doesn't say who the idea person is, and so I'd want to listen, but it seems like I don't know what the problem is there that we would be trying to fix.
I'm one of them, Bob.
Oh, okay, Councilman Rutherford, thank you. Is there anything, we're tight on time, but do you have a minute or 2 that you would like to share about your reasoning on this or your proposal?
I'd like to point out that Memphis does something similar,
Okay.
not exactly like this, but it is similar. I don't often say Memphis does something better than we do, but this is one that
Quite a few things
the idea comes from Memphis. And it also comes from Southeast and looking at serving in Southeast and the fact that Southeast has never elected someone at large from the southeast of the county. And electing into equal districts of the 5 would provide geographic representation, which we don't have now. The system clearly provides for racial representation and gender representation, but it does not provide for geographic representation, and that's what we're looking at.
If I'd known that, I wouldn't have put my points behind your fire station.
Too late now.
Just kidding.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Alrighty, okay, well, what I hear from the committee is potentially including that kind of thematically from a working group standpoint with the size of the council, because it relates to how the council is organized. The structure of the council. So Councilman Rutherford, again, the potential working group on this topic, it will not be solely members of this very small committee. So I think anyone who had a proposal in this space should definitely be a part of that working group and kind of seeing how to organize and think about that.
And I don't know who the other member is, but mine is the second one,
Okay.
as it reads there.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll make a note of that, and I appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, moving on to kind of our boards and commissions section. I think we had a new proposal for this, as well as kind of a legacy proposal that suggested a fair board at 7. There's a suggestion for at 9, and also a representative. I think also just generally, this was clearly the will of the body in the midst of some discussions in the last term. I know I myself, among some of the remarks I made as we were considering a variety of votes relative to the fair board, we all just were somewhat incredulous that how could a board for something this vast and multifaceted have only 5 people on it. So, while we've just got kind of 2 proposals here, I think when there's something, that many of us on the record said we need to change, I would ask us to think about this one being one among them, just because it does seem to be a larger group of us who feel like that has merit. There's various permutations of how that is suggested, but do colleagues have any thoughts about size of the Fair Board?
I will jump in and say, why does the Fair Board get special attention for 5 members? I was on the MTA board, which is a 5-member board. The Farmers Market Board is a 5-member board. NES is a 5-member board. I think a lot of the conversation there had broadly to do with diversity on boards and commissions, but I don't know that the size is something that I would say the Fairgrounds has a special need for more members than other boards and commissions. We have dozens of boards and commissions, and few of them are a total board size of 9. There are some large ones, but they also tend to be, I guess commissions are often larger than the boards, and I don't know how the kind of trends and norms historically were established, but I guess I wouldn't hold up, oh gosh, the Fair Board does a lot of stuff as a reason to increase the number of members.
That's a fair point, and I would ask staff as well. So we have this kind of bulleted listing of all the boards and commissions that are created by charter. I think it would also be helpful on this same list, how many members are on the board, please? Because I think some of the ones that were established by charter are clearly 5 was a popular number. And your point is well made, Councilman O'Connell. I think, some of the boards and commissions for which the decisions have had a lot of public scrutiny, there's been a lot of volatility, like that kind of puts a spotlight on them. And so, I do hear from a wide variety of folks that
that's, my gut is, I don't mind considering the size of the Fair Board just to consider it, but then I think 3 questions come up, right? One is, what is the norm, convention, or history of other boards and commissions? One is, I'm not persuaded that, gosh, they're busy is a reason, because all of our boards and commissions do important work. And I guess the third is, this was controversial, therefore we should increase the number of members, just doesn't seem to me like an argument that has merit on its face.
fair.
I agree.
Okay, so the proposal here, I guess I just kind of, this one that was new or resubmitted, increased the size of the Fair Board by 4 members appointed by council. Total board size 9, and one of those being a representative of labor. The previous had just been increased size of Fair Board to 7, and then, I guess the general commentary, to your point, in the context of conversations about diversity had been, just generally, shouldn't this be bigger? But that was apart from, I guess, a contextual review of all the other boards that were also 5 people. Okay, so colleagues, anything else that we need to ask from staff to inform a decision about that item in particular, other than just the other boards and what their numbers are? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I think this sort of dovetails well into the next 2 suggestions, because some of our commissions, which are often very sizable, and we had spoken at our first meeting about just potentially some general interest in, quote, right-sizing boards and commissions. I think, there are some that feel that certain commissions are maybe too big. And so, it seems, though not necessarily every single one, but some of those larger commissions were created by ordinance at some point, and are not established by charter. But the Film Commission here and the Music City Council Commission, with her permission, Ms. Darby, Council Lady Stiles has been working on these. And as I understand it, Ms. Darby, both of these could be established by ordinance. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. As such, colleagues, I would say with appreciation to Council Lady Stiles for her work, and we look forward to hearing more. Because those can be done by ordinance, let's just remove those.
I agree. Do we need to make a motion?
Yeah, I don't think so.
No,
We're just kind
just
of
move
working
on?
in an informal process, yep. Okay, and then NES Power Board Authority, that's also kind of under the heading of boards and commissions. The proposal there is modify Article 42 in Appendix 3 to provide some oversight from the metropolitan government in areas that are not carved out by state law.
Councilman Mendez, is that you too? Because it says draft received.
No, that's,
No, there were drafts received.
Oh, that's you?
I'll claim credit for this.
Okay.
Okay. Anything that you would like to share with the committee, Councilman O'Connell?
This originated, I mean, I guess I look at it from a couple different standpoints. One, I think we have had success broadly by having an independent public utility in terms of where I guess I would say as a part of Metro's governance has been financially extremely well run. I think there have been, so we know, we sit here today considering this, knowing that the long-term chief executive of that authority or of that utility is planning to retire. And so it's a great moment to think about where the utility goes from here. I think there are times when we would have wanted, I guess I would just say, a more collaborative approach to policy, and that could be anything from infrastructure placement vis-a-vis sidewalks, that could be utility burial and how that cost sharing and overall policy works. That could be development of solar as an option as a local power source. And I think if we were to consider this and bring a little bit more of an opportunity even to say, hey, let's look for that partnership, this could have merit. So I think this is a reasonable time to consider it because it will be at a moment when we expect new leadership for the utility. And so I think this is a great time to talk about the accountability and collaborative spirit of the relationship between NES and Metro.
Colleagues, is there anything else that questions you'd like to ask of Councilman O'Connell, or information that you would want to get from staff or see the draft that's been received?
yeah, my comments are coming from two places. One, having served on the Electric Power Board for 4 years before getting elected, and then second, from the perspective that the power is on in Davidson County something like 99.9948% of the time. And so I'm interested in seeing the draft, but this is a thing we do a lot better than Memphis. Our Metro Charter insulates intentionally the power board from the ups and downs of this building, and I think that like objectively, both financial performance and how often the power is on, our power company works better than another TVA generated big city in Tennessee, and so we should be cautious about messing with that. But there's not enough details here to really have an opinion other than caution.
As far as like infrastructure placement and stuff like that, because I get it, and it becomes an issue a lot of times actually when you're talking about sidewalks and you're talking about, you know, development, this, that, and the other. I have been talking with NDOT about, we have a thing with Nash Digs, and I don't know if you know about Nash Digs, but it's not required that the utility companies, and I'm trying to make it to where it's required, because what is the purpose if just one or two groups actually use it and the rest is like, you know, the wild, wild west? So we're looking at that, at the capacity of that actual program and how it would work, but those, I think that would help a lot, is if, because NES is one that was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. So if we can force, because I think it's a privilege to work in our right of way, obviously, regardless of what service you're providing, and so that may help some, at least on the infrastructure part of it, or placement anyway.
And then the other thing I'd add is that, like, everything in this regard, everybody has to know increases taxes. And maybe that's a good thing because we get better place utilities out of the deal. But a major component of why NES does what it does is because it has federal law requirements where it's required to not do things that are betterments, is the technical term, on electric ratepayer dime. And so if it costs money to acquire another foot of right-of-way to get a pole out of a sidewalk, when it could be in the sidewalk, electric power paying rates may not pay for that extra cost, which means it comes out of Metro's hide. And again, this is all worth looking at because obviously there's things we could do better, but we have to know that anything that's designed to make them be more collaborative, aka put stuff not in the current right of way, but some other way, we're paying for, they're not paying for. We meaning Metro as opposed to the power company.
I do think also, to Councilman O'Connell's point about leadership transition, we also have new leadership at NDOT, and I know it seems like from our service on Public Works Committee and how this has come up vis-a-vis walkable infrastructure and some of the major pole consolidations in certain corridors where I feel like if we had been more kind of collaborative and comprehensive in working with NDOT, like the result for the community would have been a win-win for everybody, and probably could have maybe not gotten around, but understood the kind of the betterments clause. But so we've just not been so great about that, and it seems like that it has languished a little bit. So I guess Councilman O'Connell, what I'm hearing from the committee is they would like to see that proposed
happy
language. Okay, so
I can share
if
it
you'll
with
just
the
make a
committee.
note of that, Ms. Darby, that way we can kind of, once we see that, make a consideration.
Do you want her to share my draft at the same time for that first one?
Sure, yeah, if that's okay
With
with
the
you.
analysis, because I'm gonna read it and go like,
That's not
no.
ready for prime time.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. We're gonna request the analysis at a later date, but, okay, so last three here, cannabis possession enforcement, prohibit the expenditure of funds for the purpose of enforcing laws on simple possession of cannabis and possession of cannabis paraphernalia, as well as prohibit accepting grants and entering into intergovernmental agreements to fund such activities, which would be a new proposed section in the charter. Comments or questions on this item?
I can just very quickly, these next three are mine, and I have to run out the door in 1 minute. The third one, ranked choice voting, has been preempted by our friends up the street there,
Okay.
so that one can get scratched.
Councilmember, can I just ask, I mean, should we not have the charter at least offer that opportunity if and when state comes back? Is it worth spending time and energy on that, or do you think it's dead for quite some time?
They're no.
All right.
It's too complicated.
Okay. All right.
It's very simple. Anyway, I think that people will be confused that they're voting for it to be able to happen.
Yeah.
Cannabis, we of course decriminalize cannabis. The vast majority of Nashvillians and Tennesseans support the concept, but we are not allowed to regulate that anymore. So instead, we would simply not fund such efforts. And I'm sorry for, y'all can come back and discuss when I run out the door, but the Gsd Liquor Sales, right now you are not allowed to sell or manufacture anything besides beer in the GSD, which is outdated and
It's
absurd.
super, I
and
agree.
inconvenient for somebody who lives 15 minutes from the USD.
Everybody needs a bourbon every once in a while.
So,
near their house.
I'm sorry I have to
No,
run.
thank you.
We sell it in District 19.
We sell it at 26 too. It's a free for all.
So,
I wanted to ask about the cannabis thing. Is that, this is a question for the lawyers. Does that get into an issue with like the DA and his responsibility and what he's choosing, this, that, and the other? I mean, I guess you could say about not receiving money, but do we receive money specifically for cannabis enforcement? Is that a thing? I'm just wondering,
I don't know if we receive money specifically for cannabis enforcement, but to the extent that we, on number 2 here, I did separate these two. He had it all in one sentence, but number 2, I mean, if we wanted to not accept grant funds for such enforcement activities, I think that we could do that. Prohibiting the expenditure of funds, that might get us in a little hot water. So we should be reluctant on that. I can do some more research on it. We haven't taken those steps yet.
So like with two, would
Process.
that would prohibit, when we get, when we do intergovernmental agreements with the state or federal government for, interdiction on the interstate?
It's possible. It depends on what those MOUs say. I mean, if we wanted to prohibit accepting grants and those MOUs included accepting grants and, if it includes funding from other sources to engage in those activities, that would be.
is this a better, and I'm just thinking out loud, is this a better thing that maybe from the state level decriminalizing cannabis? I think there's 2 bills right now going through the House that would do that, or to a certain extent anyway. Is that, I mean, I know we don't like to leave it up to the state, but is that something that the county needs to do? I mean, to be honest with you, I'm sort of agnostic on the whole thing. I just don't want to create problems, and I also don't want to waste one of our 6, and I say 6 just.
Rule of thumb.
Yeah, yeah.
We can't run, an infinite number of charter amendments.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering.
I mean, I understand where Councilmember Rosenberg is coming from. This is clearly a place where, my sense is that the citizens of Nashville, broadly would support, some amount of decriminalization of simple possession. I guess my related question would be, are either of these things that could be done effectively by ordinance? Like, is this a requirement to amend the charter?
I don't think, well, again, number 2 is a little bit more palatable, it seems, from a legal perspective, and that could be something done by ordinance. But again, we might want to do a review of all the types of grants and intergovernmental
Sure.
contracts that we currently are in that fund these types of
I mean,
activities.
I know
and
there are
enforcement.
some, like, we do interagency task force type work, right? We participate in equitable sharing, et cetera. I think where I'm coming from is, I appreciate the spirit of where Councilmember Rosenberg is approaching this issue. I'm just not sure that it's the kind of thing that I would expect to see in a charter for a local government, and so that's why I wanna figure out, they seem, like, to me, these read as things we might like to tackle through the Metro Code of Laws, if possible. I mean, obviously, like, the GSD thing, that makes sense, because that's already delineated in the charter, so we have to amend that out. This to me, I'm not sure I would wanna introduce new material for that.
I think we can leave it just the way it is right now, and when we get to a next meeting and pick a top 10 or 6 or 12 list, I'm guessing this isn't gonna be on it.
agreed.
I do think to me, the liquor sales one makes a lot of common sense, though.
I agree.
I think it's a common sense one. I also think it's a very easy and, no pun intended, palatable one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just something that the public can kind of say like, oh yeah, I want, I don't know if it kind of.
I want a liquor store.
Does it get people to
I'm
the
sure
polls?
the GSD will show up to the voting booth and let us know if
There
they,
you go,
if they want to have that opportunity.
Okay,
Can I interject one thing?
yes.
I noticed that one item, when we were moving some stuff around, got left off of the new submissions. There was a submission to rename the Metro Water Services.
Oh,
And
yes, yeah.
I don't have don't have it in front of me, but there was a long
Okay,
name.
I remember a
It's
pretty.
You have it in front of you.
Metro Water and Garbage Services.
Yeah, okay, and I
Well,
think that
there are
probably
some cities, and we'll talk about
dovetails,
this later,
with
but there's
the administration's proposal, but,
Yeah.
renaming Metro Water was the proposal. Again, this was sort of a draft, before we got to
I-
this final version. It says, and I'll just read it.
Yeah, yeah.
Per the, proposer. Create a Department of Sanitation and Sustainability, or Natural Resources that would be the new home for Metro Water, solid waste, beautification, recycling, stormwater, etc. I think this is going to depend on the administration's proposal. I think right now there is some kind of confusion in the community just because this is done through MOU at present, right? I understand why the departments have not stepped out for a kind of full rebranding. But as such, it's pretty confusing, right? Because you gotta go to the Metro Water Services Facebook page to get updates about what's happening to your trash service. Like,
But Metro Beautification Commissioners are still at Public Works.
right, which, that whole beautification thing is kind of a mess about where that goes. And I understand why now brush is still picked up by NDOT because they have the boom arm trucks in case a tree falls on the road. But that also is not a particularly logical separation. So I think some of that, I had asked colleagues to kind of get an update on where the establishment of NDOT was as far as the draft of that. So Mr. Jamison, can you just kind of speak to that, please? Because it does have implications on something proposed by a council member and it's related.
Sure. This is one of the administration's top priorities, and the reason I say that is you may remember that when NDOT was created and the MOU was adopted, there was a timeline placed on it by council, a 3-year duration. So that was a year ago. So we're going to be at the end of that before you know it. So if it should be on the August charter amendment, that would help us establish NDOT. I believe Terry Costonis has been working on a draft, but I had advised her that today's meeting was not one in which formal drafts were being submitted, so I think she's mindful of that. But
No, that's correct, yeah, there was no expectation that you would, have a draft here. I think, just as chair, I would appreciate kind of seeing and understanding that as early as possible because it helps inform what we're going to choose kind of on the council side and how they're related to each other, so,
yeah, for the next meeting.
okay.
And I guess I would ask a follow-up, Mike. I know we have talked about it. This description makes it sound like this would be assigning solid waste to Metro Water rather than creating a standalone.
And I should correct that. I think there are options there, and standalone being among them. The Solid Waste Authority, I think, is definitely in play, subject to the council's agreement. So I think you can look for that within a proposal charter amendment.
So, Ms. Darby, I would suggest when you update this document to include the one that got dropped out, that maybe at that time it would be good, Mike, to also update the language here because I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we assign solid waste to Metro Water. We might want to establish a separate waste services and or, I think that remains to be seen. So, okay. Colleagues, any other questions for Mr. Jamison, particular to the administration proposals on our handout C? I guess just for the public, we've got NDOT. The administration concurs with what Councilman Mendez spoke to as far as the charter amendment referendum process, Article 19. We've also, Mr. Sharp with the Health Department is here with us today, and I believe, Mr. Sharp, your board voted in November
2019.
of 2019.
I strongly support the Health Department's
So, and
position on this.
can I add just a little
You're
bit?
recognized, yes.
So, since it has been a while, there's been a lot of virus under the bridge since they voted. They've taken another look at wanting to make sure that that we had ensured that everything that they passed in November 19 aligned with legislative changes that have been made to the practice of public health since then. and we hadn't gotten crosswise with any of that. We met with Dewey Brandstetter, who is the chairman of the Charter Commission.
Commission, yes.
And he had a couple of suggestions on things that he thought would be smarter, and he was right, I think. The board had looked at it last month.
Okay.
And we'll review it again on the 10th of this month.
Okay, March
And I
10th.
believe that if there are a couple little changes, I brought it to him because a couple of things that Mr. Brandstetter recommended they need to change.
Okay,
So it needs to be a little bit different from what was approved in 19. They may want to look at, their initial request was to expand the board to 9. They may want to reduce that to 7.
okay.
From the current 6. So it's a.
So you're currently at 6?
It's currently at 6. And it does a couple of other things, but, so anyway, the plan is that they will get done with what they're asking on March the 11th, and then we'll make it available to you as you need.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Sharp just quickly, from a protocol and kind of order of operations standpoint, given the timeline that you may have seen here as far as kind of when we need to file and what we need to do on our end, that's getting, let's see, we're wanting to kind of file by the end of the month. Ms. Darby, can you speak to, is that something, Mr. Sharp, that you would want our committee to see in a similar vein to getting Mr. Branstetter's input? Because I would suggest if you've got something voted on by your board, you only meet monthly and it's already baked, and then it gets over to us, and then council has any concern with it, and we've not kind of looked at it through a council lens and what we know some of the issues might be, then you might be not in the best position to effectuate the changes you want to make.
I think if there are any, once you see it, if there are changes that you want to make,
I'm not suggesting that there are, I'm just suggesting you might want, in a similar vein to asking Chair Brandstetter what he thought, and if there were any suggestions, I would suggest perhaps you need to, I know you sent it to me based on, what you had voted in November 2019. Then you indicated, as you shared here, wanted to make some updates, and I've subsequently asked, where is that? So I guess I would suggest that if at the next meeting, we're gonna have some more particular language, the amendment Councilman Mendez proposed, the amendment Councilman O'Connell's proposing, administration language, I would hope would be in draft form at next meeting. I would likewise hope the same. But that said, from a timeline standpoint, we're not, let's see, we are meeting
The 14th.
14th. So I just didn't know, before your board votes on the 10th or 11th, would you just like some council feedback on what you're gonna put before your board? Respectfully, I mean, you don't have to.
That's absolutely fine with me,
Okay.
if you want to do that. The board will have discussion on the 10th,
Okay.
a week from Thursday.
Okay, well, committee, if that's okay with you, what I would hope is before the 14th, we're sending an email to the committee for y'all to do a little homework before we get here. So that could, probably go in advance of your meeting, and that way, if there was any feedback, we could relay that to you, just for your consideration respectfully. It's not that we're saying, change this, do that. It's just, sometimes I think some boards don't think of things understandably and a good thing in a political space. But when it gets over here and we've got to get it through council, we want to help you achieve what you want to achieve for an effective Board of Health. And so I would just suggest that we have a little bit of,
So tomorrow I'll send you what is currently on the table,
okay, great,
with the understanding that it may be a little bit different by.
understood.
Yes,
Just
sir.
make sure,
Okay.
mark draft, that's
All
fine. Okay, colleagues, anything else from the administration that we want to request? Yes,
I think that when we're using 6 as the rule of thumb today, I think when we make that decision, we're going to be driven in part by the very long nature of some of these.
understood.
And so just the administration ones are not all going to happen. And so I think the administration should be asked to prioritize. And I don't know whether they want to rank them in numerical order or like categories of must-have, would be nice, can do it later. They can prioritize it however they want.
That's
but,
helpful.
gonna have to pick a couple.
Okay. Mr. Jameson, are you
Sure. And I
hearing
would-
that? Okay.
Absolutely. I would probably tell you the last three you see there can probably be dismissed. These were just my personal, there's some peccadillos in the charter that ought to be fixed someday, but no urgency.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then the only one here that you're saying those last three, let's kind of drop that as far as just little language fixes. MNPD personnel revises, yes, sir. Yep.
Madam Chair, I think going back to a previous conversation, I feel like, do we feel like there is space, because one thing, and I don't know, I didn't send this in and probably should have, I feel like I mentioned it in passing it somewhere along the way, it's sort of an omnibus cleanup item, and I don't see anything related to that, but I wonder if there's any space for something like that that would address Councilmember Mendez's concern, pick up some administration concerns, but I know I've flagged some very anachronistic language that we could also do, and maybe that would be acceptable, I don't know, I'm just putting it on the
Ms.
table.
Darby, can you speak to what the practical kind of implications of omnibus housekeeping would be, and whether it's kind of doable as it has to be organized?
I think it would depend on what the housekeeping measures are. I mean, if you're looking at changing, multiple provisions within the charter, and there are different types of, items in each section that are being changed. For instance, just the two last ones here that are the interim finance and the COB nomination process, those two are very different. And so they would, I think would require separate amendments. I don't think it would be,
Okay.
you could put it under one amendment. And I'm thinking back to the one that you did prior, which was to, change the gender
Right.
names. You could do that in one, it was omnibus, it went
Because it
throughout.
was a consistent type of change
making the
throughout
same
the
change.
document.
Wherever you found just he,
Yep.
him, then you went back and said,
And Councilman, I don't think it's necessarily the number of things, I think it's just the sheer, how many times people are gonna have to press next page is what we're gonna end up focused on.
yeah.
Democracy takes commitment.
What I would say, in a similar vein to how, the council staff has been kind of maintaining a running list of potential amendments, I would say just categorize and have a running list of these kind of housekeeping type amendments, and it may not be within our term, but, there may be another time when there's not anything to do except one thing, and then you can get some of those housekeeping in. But I think, I appreciate that, Councilman O'Connell. I would love if we could do something like that, but it looks like we're just gonna have, the few that we choose are gonna be kind of an order of complexity and length that I think, that would be too much, perhaps. Okay, so the last thing that's on here from an administration perspective that I just kind of want to read into the record for consideration. MNPD personnel revises the citizenship requirement to allow legal residents who are honorably discharged veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces to be officers, and revises the physical requirements by deleting the standards based upon military regimens. Mr. Jameson, do you want to speak to that just
Sure.
briefly?
Currently, the charter restricts police department personnel to being U.S. citizens. In 2014, state legislation was adopted that expands that to either U.S. citizens or legal residents who've been honorably discharged. So it expands the diversification opportunities, and we're slightly behind the times in the charter. The charter also specifies that recruits have to pass specified Army and or Navy physical fitness regimens that have no application to an urban police environment. And to the extent that's also favorably construed as demilitarizing, that we anticipate would be well received. Councillady Suara and Councilmember Pulley have both asked to co-sponsor. And there is a draft available. I can recirculate that.
I personally think these are very reasonable changes, and, I mean, again, we will have to
Right.
rank order these,
Prioritize.
but I think this one deserves consideration.
Is this as simple as just taking it out, because why on earth does the charter specify the the military physical standards to be in the police, you know, I mean, there are, to Councilman O'Connell's point, these just sort of anachronistic, weird things where you're just like, why is this in the charter? So I appreciate that this has kind of practical implications for, you know, our the diversity and just the effectiveness of our police force. So obviously, we're all supportive of that. Anything else that colleagues need to know or have questions about that particular proposal? So again, I guess there's already draft language for it, and so that's something we can get out to the committee before next meeting.
I guess on that, you might say, I was about to do that, Bob, shush. But I find myself, we're talking about sending out a couple immediately, trying to get some other package out in, sounds like less than 10 days. I'm wondering whether we should get the couple out immediately if a full set is gonna go out just in a week and a half. And I'm guessing that's what you were gonna try to figure out next, is what the next step is.
Yeah, next step. So your proposal then would be, I mean,
Well,
I think there are things that are drafted as of today, correct? That we have, okay. And then, is your point as to like the comparison analysis that Ms. Johnson was asking for, that would be later for purpose of discussion at next meeting, or?
I guess I found myself wondering, so someday before the next meeting, we're gonna get a package of some amendments. I guess I'm not clear exactly which of these are gonna turn into amendments between now and when we meet next. Like the remove mayor line item veto, is somebody gonna turn that into an amendment? Like some of these I know already exist, some of them we're definitely got, like the health department one, but there's some others on here that I'm not clear whether they're gonna get drafted or not, and I'm wondering who's gonna decide which ones turn into language and when that happens.
That was our job.
It is.
Okay.
Well, it's
So,
Margaret's.
I think.
Well, not to actually write them, but I'm just saying, like,
I think the intent had been to kind of go through all the proposals and then to determine if there were some that were kind of very obviously were just kind of taking off just from the jump, right? If there are any that are kind of in a middling space, to your point, you know, I think we have eliminated some of them, but my take was that if a language had been drafted, that basically it would just inform the vote and the choice to support it or not. And so I think what may be important to convey to fellow committee members is the fact that it exists in draft form does not necessarily, among the myriad options, give it more validity or suggest that it's further down the path. I mean, we're still kind of voting on something on its merits, but I think to your point as to capacity and bandwidth, the actual physical size of what the change is does somewhat inform the decision. And so, I mean, I would welcome your input as vice chair through Ms. Darby, just basically how we package that and frame it for the committee's consideration.
Let me ask about one in particular,
Yeah.
just to help think about it. So there's one that about increasing the size of the fair board that I think for the four of us in the room, Councilman O'Connell was persuasive, and I'm not sure any of the four of us in the room would say, yeah, draft that one up.
agreed.
But whoever's idea it was might feel like,
Yeah, fair.
no, it should be drafted up. But if it's not drafted up by the time we get to the next meeting, like, we're not gonna recommend it. And so is that person on their own to separately ask that it gets drafted up? Or do we wanna give notice about these 5 are being drafted up? If you want some other one drafted up, make sure you talk to Director Darby.
Well, and then speaking to capacity, like and maybe I'm off base, but I think we're already at that 5 or 6 that are, regardless of being drafted or not, are things that from a priority perspective need to happen to clean some things up. and that also are very common sense, not super contentious issues that I think, again, sort of need to happen. So if we're already there, obviously your amendment, I think Councilman Rosenberg's amendment as far as just the threshold would probably just be disregarded because in deference to yours that's more comprehensive. So that's one. I think all of the, we already decided all of the council type stuff would be put into a work study thing, but not this particular referendum. The size of the fair board, probably not, just because I think there's others that would trump it. The other two on the council were could be handled by ordinance. I think it's worth looking at the NES Power Board Authority. So we've asked for more information from Councilman O'Connell. The cannabis.
We've already got a draft on that one.
Oh, already drafted. Okay. And then so the cannabis enforcement, I think we got some issues there. I think that's probably one that would probably be bumped. The Gsd Liquor Sales, I think, is a check mark. It's easy enough. The NDOT establishment, solid waste, Metro Water, whatever we're gonna do with that, I think that's a check mark. They're in favor of Bob's. So then Councilman Mendez. The Public Health Department is probably a go, depending on what you guys come up with, right? And then the MNPD personnel, everything else they said could probably go away. So that right there, we're at 5 or 6 already. And so I would say, I mean, to me, I'm just more of a let's move on.
I think, so you named 6 that you thought would be good enough to draft,
I think in the
Margaret,
interest of.
did you get the same
Yeah,
6?
so here's kind of what my takeaway is. I was gonna send out a reprioritized list after this meeting, but kind of on the A list of things, I've got the amend the Article 19, GSD Liquor Sales, NDOT establishment, Public Health Department, and MNPD personnel. And then on the B list of things where we might move forward is the Fair Board increase size and the NES Power Board. Of those two, the NES Power Board is drafted already, and so we can circulate.
Is
There's
the
only
Fair Board
2.
on a B list? I mean, that's what
I don't know, I have it starred and then I put it down as B, so
I think
that's up
to
to y'all.
Bob's point, because we presented this meeting as an informal kind of work session of sorts at which we would, not be kind of taking a final vote on what we're doing. Here we sort of, obviously staff knows the members who propose certain things, but, to your question about the colleague who would have proposed the Fair Board, he or she is not here to speak on that, nor, was, I think the thought was at the next meeting, once we kind of distilled a little bit, then we might invite that colleague if they wanted to be associated with the amendment, which, yeah.
So is it worth with the the new
Priorities
list?
list, priorities list.
Does it make sense with the new list to then communicate to all 40 members that, so there's 6 that drafts have been prepared or are being prepared, and if you're interested in this committee further considering something other than the 6,
I think that's
talk to
I
the
think that's
director
right.
about.
Yeah, I
Or-
think though, I'm gonna have to kind of think through, and I can send a draft, for consideration, but I think what we're wanting to do, through this process and at the next meeting is to make sure that, colleagues feel, heard, that their ideas are duly recorded, if not for this time, but for the future. Because I think what has been problematic historically with council less involved on the front end, as we got toward the finish line, when we had some very complex things like ranked choice voting, which take a fair amount of education, et cetera, we got to the finish line and there were a whole lot of amendments and a whole lot of changes, and it was very complicated, and it was a difficult process. So I am hoping to kind of front load the discussion and the education. So I think I want colleagues to know that we've talked these through, and there is a kind of general consensus, but no decisions have been made yet, and that is true and accurate. So.
And then also, it's not, we're not saying no, we're saying there are some things that are like NDOT and this Article 19 that are obviously really important, not that this other stuff is not important, but as it relates to this first round of charter amendments for this term, respectfully, maybe this is the next time. Because what I don't want is for all the council members to go, oh, well, if everybody's getting drafted, then we're going to overwhelm her office and they're, for all this stuff. So I think it might be helpful if you guys had a conversation with folks to say, hey, look, we decided this and this is sort of where we're heading as far as prioritization.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest, Ms. Darby. I mean, particular to the Fair Board, because there is the 9, there is the 7, there is council, there's the labor. Like, I think maybe going back to the proposer or proposers, plural, and we'll kind of frame up an explanation of today, what's anticipated at next meeting, and to Bob's point, to maybe share with that colleague just kind of some of the discussion, and see if she would like for you to draft an amendment. Thank you. I don't think I want to kind of put colleagues in the position of, if you draft an amendment, it somehow bumps it up in priority, and then I don't think it really, from as far as setting expectations, it's.
That's all fine. The only thing, I guess, then back to about so there are 6 that this group is wanting drafted for the next meeting, and I'm indifferent whether the 2 that are already prepared get distributed immediately or hold them, so it's with the other 4 that are coming. Either way is fine with me. I don't care.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think
I have 7.
What's that?
I have 7 on my list of things that are potentials that got more positive discussion about moving forward. Do you have the liquor sales on yours?
I have Article 19. Did we say, I didn't know if decreased council size made it.
no, that's for working group.
Okay, then,
Fair Board?
Power Board, I didn't have
The
Fair Board.
the Fair Board, I don't think we're drafting.
Yeah.
Okay.
GSD Liquor,
Yes.
Metro Public Health, NDOT, and MNPD personnel.
Okay. All right.
Is that right, Chair?
Yes.
Not drafting Fair Board.
Yeah, I think we can put it to the proposer if she wants,
Sure,
or he
sure.
wants to fine tune that language. But, okay. Thank you all for your
Thank you,
time.
Madam
I
Chair.
appreciate that.
Thanks.
With that, we are adjourned.